Hi, this is Bill Hader.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Bill Hader. Bill Hader.
Hello and welcome to lucky episode 13 of We Heart Hater. I'm your non-arsonist co-host, Casey Killingsworth.
And I'm Deej Barons, and you know what this podcast reminds me of? My dad.
The reason we picked out that quote, or Deej did specifically, was because this episode we're doing not a character spotlight or an impression spotlight, but our first sketch spotlight on the Song Memories series of sketches. You know, this really started a trend, I think, with modern SNL, in that recurring sketch, but not with any notable recurring characters. I mean, these guys don't even have names. They're not even the same person from sketch to sketch. It's just a template where it hits the same beats in a different way each time, just same setting.
There is one time where names are implied, and there's also one where a name is specifically mentioned, but it is a rare occasion.
And they follow the basic formula of four regular guys played by Bill Hader, Jason Sudeikis, Will Forte, and that week's male host. They're hanging out at a bar or restaurant, just catching up, just old friends, reliving old times. And then Sudeikis comes in, hey, brought you guys each. And then the host comes in, hey, I just picked the perfect song off the jukebox or off this mixtape. And then they all start talking about how much they love this song. Each guy takes turns telling these increasingly outlandish stories of a shocking, horrific personal memory they have that this song invokes, and they each sing the chorus in unison with an additional tag on the end. Nostalgia and singing and alcohol are big underlying themes of these. And you know, they're real expertly timed in this way for a live show, I gotta say. And they usually have a twist ending of some kind with all four guys suddenly engaging in some unexpected activity. Fun for the most part. There might be a little diminishing returns, but that happens with a lot of recurring SNL features. And someone on Sean Bradley's old message board, Saturday-night-live.com, or possibly the Void board, one of those, as these were airing in real time, said that these sketches were basically late 2000s SNL's version of Bill Brasky, which I think is a valid take, except, you know, the difference are there's more music involved here. The characters are portrayed as like more normal looking, regular, everyday guys on the surface instead of just these wild caricatures of drunk, ruddy-faced salesmen from the 50s and telling stories about themselves rather than like this mythologized old friend of theirs. It's like that, but like it's like the Brasky sketches, but more modern. And
Yeah, selecting the songs was actually a very important thing. I can't remember who said in what interview, but they had to find a song that had those pauses, had recognizable chorus, had those pauses, so that they could do the initial introduction and the little addendum at the end. So it was a very tricky sketch in terms of timing.
yeah, and I wonder if they had trouble getting clearance for songs just based on if they had to explain what these sketches were about, because I don't think they'd get clearance. The first of these sketches aired in mid-season 32 on February 24th, 2007, with hosts Rainn Wilson and musical guest Arcade Fire. And the songs here are Danny's Song by Loggins and Messina, and Miserlou by Dick Dale. They usually go in the order of Sudeikis, Hader, Forte, and the host. So first we get Jason's memory. The song reminds him of being driven home from the emergency room in 4th grade after a field trip. He got his penis bitten at a petting zoo right through the pants. But don't worry, they found the guy that did it, and it was the last time he saw his uncle, which plays a bit weirder if you know who Jason's uncle is in real life. Yeah,
Oh my God, I never thought about that. Why didn't that occur to me?
Yeah.
It should have.
R.I.P. George Wendt.
R.I.P.
And
George Wendt.
of course, Bill's memory is...
You know what this song reminds me of? What? My dad.
Another recurring motif.
You love this song. Remember we had this one great day at the park. We just had so much fun. He was running in the grass and chasing squirrels. They had this fountain and we threw pennies in it for hours. Wow, so great. It's the first day I ever thought to myself, just, I have a dad, and not, I have a dad with Down syndrome.
I really love crayons, and I actually legitimately remember the words Down syndrome being bleeped in a rerun of this episode, so it might have gotten some complaints. Will's memory is the first time he committed arson, and he was just standing there just basking in the warmth of that all-consuming flame, and a car drove by playing this song, and he thought,
God, if they ever find out I did this, I will never be able to teach at this grade school again.
you know, it's flammable finger paints. Rainn Wilson's memory, an anonymous gay sex tryst at a Newark Airport Bennigan's bathroom stall. And I like the detail of, he was standing inside a shopping bag, so if the cops started looking in, it would only look like there was one set of feet under there. And when this song came on, he couldn't help himself. He laughed so hard, the other guy's pee came out of his nose. And this ended with all four guys just pulling out guns, like, nobody move! So, like a Pulp Fiction style hijack. And this sketch had the same ending and beginning as Pulp Fiction, and this seemed to mostly go for the dark, edgelord shock laughter, but what can you do? It was 2007. And I'm sure the spirit of Michael O'Donoghue was smiling up on them. One odd thing is, Forte's been known for his fearlessness, but he seemed to be holding back a bit. He still delivers, and, maybe he just thought, I should give these other newer guys a chance to be outrageous edgelords here.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily call it edgelord humor, because basically just the shock value what they say. So throughout all 8 editions, that has been the hallmark of the sketch. And there are a couple times in the future where Bill doesn't say my dad, but when he does say, it's just the way he says my dad. It's always said very sincerely, just adds to this also like, did they really just say that?
Right, yeah, it's less shocking than seeing what they can get away with. And strangely enough, this sketch had a mention of anonymous gay sex in an airport bathroom stall, and yet it aired several months before the scandal with Senator Larry Craig, a Republican Minnesota senator who famously got arrested for soliciting gay sex in an airport bathroom stall, which, SNL and every other comedy show at the time had a field day with. Barely related to this sketch, but just got to get those historical tidbits in there.
Well, one more point about this one, SNL Day Project, in the review of this one, he mentions that they could have used the other fluid that would emanate from a man's penis, but I guess they went with I would guess probably the network says, no, you can't use this, but you can use this other one. So, okay, the next one we have is the May 19th, 2007, season 32, episode 20, where Zach Braff is the host. And just as a neat aside, I kind of met him, there's a few years ago, they're doing a live show with going over the Scrubs episode My Musical. So I went down to this town to see them. I got to ask them a question. I got a copy of Zach Braff's, one of the movies Zach Braff directed. A small interaction with Zach Braff, because I'm a big Scrubs fan.
Well, congratulations. And I'll have a tidbit about a personal interaction of mine later, but go on.
Yeah, and it was his movie The Good Person. It's autograph, so that's the little thing I have in my collection. The song that they're using is The Weight by the band, and I never knew the song was called The Weight. I always thought the song was Take a Load Off Fatty. So, although a lot of these songs were songs that I grew up with. Well, first we have Jason Sudeikis, where he has the memory of his high school girlfriend.
One time while we were, getting busy, her braces got caught in a very sensitive area. Ooh. Yeah, I know. I screamed so loud everyone in the church could hear it.
And with Bill we get my dad. I think this is one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, he used to take trips for work all the time and take me with him. I was so scared of flying, but he was always there for me.
That's so great.
I remember one time I was 9, we were coming back from Mexico, and I was nervous about the flight, but he sang me the song, and I instantly felt better.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know what I was more full of, joy or those condoms filled with heroin that he made me swallow.
And of course, ending with the, anytime I put a condom in my mouth, I think of my dad. Will Forte, who was caught drunk driving, and he was drunk driving a school bus because afterwards they just let him, for some reason, let him go, and the kids weren't mad because they were all drunk too.
Yeah, the cop let him off with just a busted taillight. So he got back in the bus and drove those drunk kids to school.
Exactly. And then we finish off with Zach Braff, where apparently he likes filling FedEx boxes with poop and mailing them to various people. In particular, he's really hoping that Rachel Ray opens her own mail.
Very 2007 reference there.
I kind of liked with that one how he fit in their motto at the time, at the speed of business. And the ending, where they all start to get stripped and the song Get Down. Although I did notice in this that Hader does not remove his shirt. And I think that's just something he's just kind of never really comfortable with. The same thing happened when he was doing the to-do list. He was never filmed shirtless. It was strictly always had a shirt on any of the pool scenes. I think the only time I've seen him in something without a shirt on is in the drones episode of Documentary Now. It's when I think it's the third set of reporters that they have in, where he's basically getting this big circle burned into his chest. Oh, and the other time would be when he was filming his suicide scene in Skeleton Twins. And we'll have a bit on Skeleton Twins later, too. But yeah, this is one of my favorite ones. I just love my dad stuff. And with the condom thing, that's the one that kind of set me over.
This is basically it was nearly a carbon copy of the first sketch, but they went a little bit less dark. I mean, yeah, Hader and Forte shine in this. Yeah, they prove here that they just the right likable personalities to be able to put over such highly questionable humor so easily. Hader more so than Forte, because we've kind of seen what Forte can do by this point, and that's what makes these sketches work. They're really the glue holding these together. Another Hader Hartman comparison. They can both be the glue of their respective eras. Yeah, usually Sudeikis has a likable personality to put stuff over. He's got to be careful and not lean into it and not play too much of a sleaze for these to work. And Zach Braff, I think, was the only weak link in this. I mean, the only thing that drags it down. I mean, mailing people your own poop isn't that funny, not even with a tag of, oh, I got you guys something, and brings his own box, or I don't know, it's like something about Zach Braff. He's honestly like the type of celebrity who now, if someone told me he really has been mailing his own poop around the world to people, I'd probably believe him.
One of the highlights from this episode, because that's actually one of the ones I do like, is the second edition of La Rivista della Televisione with Vidi Vici. And one thing you don't see online much at all is there's a sketch called Prom Committee.
That one was a fun one from this episode.
Yes, because we had Amy and Maya as the stuck-up girls.
They're both named BJ, but only one of them has an explanation, or one of them has the initials BJ, and the other just doesn't have an explanation why she's called BJ.
All the different ideas that people had, like, of course, Zach Braff comes up with, we should have a Garden State themed prom. He was the one who wrote and directed that movie. Bill and Kristen play a couple who don't believe in sex before marriage, or in his case, before prom, which keeps getting mixed up. The way Bill reacted when trying to explain why not having sex before prom, but no, it's marriage, was pretty uncomfortable for him.
I did like Forte as Lyle Kane in that sketch with his prom theme. Get to know Lyle Kane.
Yes.
And Sandberg proposing like a virtual Middle Earth prom, and Lyle Kane saying, no, I want to go to a real prom and get laid for real. And then the principal comes in, who's literally just Daryl Hammond as Sean Connery, saying, All these girls wanted the James Bond prom theme. I consider them all, but I have to say the two BJs were the most convincing, so James Bond it is.
Yeah. Those are my point I had with that. Right. Yeah. So and that appears again in the LeBron James episode.
So the guys all stripped to Jungle Boogie by Kool and the Gang, and then we're out. The next song memory sketch was in the April 12th, 2008 episode with host Ashton Kutcher and musical guest Gnarls Barkley. The song is Amy by Pure Prairie League. Jason's memory is how he just got over a rough patch with his current girlfriend. Well, so we break the format, we break the formula that we've established where Jason talks about getting his penis injured, and Bill talks about his dad. Forte talks about endangering children, and then the host is just the wild card. They'll tell a story that somehow involves their own or others' bodily waste. But in this one, we get each of the guys talking about and naming a specific woman that the song Amy by Pure Prairie League reminds them of. Jason goes first and says it reminds him of his current girlfriend, Heather.
You guys know we had that rough patch like 4 months ago. Then all of a sudden, things changed. You know, she's so laid back now, and she's finally listening to me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it is. And I gotta say, the sex has been awesome. She doesn't say no to anything anymore. And I gotta be honest, I actually went out and looked at engagement rings last week.
Man, you gonna ask her to marry you?
I think I will, right after she comes out of the coma.
Man, he loves being a doctor. And then Bill's memory has to do with Connie Chung because his two major fetishes are Asian women and broadcast journalists. So Connie Chung roughly translates to the perfect storm. He's been writing her letters for years, and he finally got to meet her face to face. And he'll never forget what she said to him.
Wow, what'd she say?
It was great. She said, "You can keep the panties, just get the hell out of my shower before I call the cops."
And the panties fit his face perfectly. And Will's memory is of a girl named Courtney who he finally got the courage to ask out, but she stonewalled him. She turned him down, and he asked her why, and he said, "I just found out you're a pedophile." And he says, a pedophile? That's a pretty big word for a 10-year-old. Stupid tattletale, or mom broke up with him. And Ashton's memory involves taking estrogen after a prostate scare. And in addition to the side effects of nausea and vomiting, the other side effect was gaining 300 pounds. Realizing a change needed to be made after showering with a loofah on a stick and looking down and being unable to see her own vagina. And by the way, at this point, Ashton reveals that
You guys know I'm a chick, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
And you're aware my name is Amy. Oh! That's why I picked the song!
at the end, they all put on Village People hats and dance to YMCA. So far, this might actually be the weakest one of these. I think we're seeing diminishing turns. Ashton Kutcher being there now doesn't make it any less creepy. I mean, jokes about questionable gender identity might have died with any host. Imagine if he told Forte's story. That would have been passed around social media like wildfire today. They might have went a little too dark or not dark enough in a fun way, which is strange because as we've seen, Will Forte has been able to sell the absolute hell out of pedophile-based humor at other times, like when he plays his character Jeff Montgomery. But at least when he does that character, he does make it clear that the character is the butt of the joke and they're not making light of any real sexual abuse victims in any way, which kind of gets left out of the sketch. But yeah, they did try to shake up the formula a bit. That's positive. And, even Bill didn't talk about his dad for once. And Bill was this is going to sound extremely on brand for us, but Bill may have been the best part of this. Is his Connie Chung story was just delivered in a funny way, and he was clearly the most into the YMCA dance at the end. So At least, it ended on an up note.
They won the weaker one because this one is not on YouTube. It is on Vimeo because Vimeo is not quite as...
They're a bit more laxed with copyright strikes and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't even remember if Vimeo stuff is monetized or not. But yeah, this sketch is definitely not available online through YouTube. Not just for song reasons, but most likely for the Will Forte's bit.
And Ashton's bit not playing well today either.
Yeah, definitely not. But the rest of the episode, there's some highlights for me, is the first edition of The Meadow Show with Bill has Dave Matthews. And the song he sang on there was called Snickerdoodle Cookie. And there's a YouTube clip out there of the Dave Matthews Band actually singing the song Snickerdoodle Cookie.
I watched that about 35 times. Everybody that walked into my house, snickerdoodle cookie. I laugh when I hear myself sing too, man. That's some funny shit. Snickerdoodle cookie.
The other one was, they had a runner with Ashton Kutcher called Death by Chocolate, where he's dressed as a chocolate bar and basically going around killing people. A lot of people don't necessarily love the sketch, but I still find it very charming, is the series The Cougar Den. Since I'm kind of that age at the moment, I relate to it even more now. Surprised a bit of Cameron Diaz in there. The other infamous bit, in a funny way, where probably what is called one of the worst digital shorts, Daiquiri Girl.
Yeah, and I'll defend Daiquiri Girl and the Cougar Den, and that was a highlight for me. And, I'd like to read the entire text scroll from Daiquiri Girl. Okay, so here we go.
We Heart Hater is proud to present a dramatic reading of the scroll from Daiquiri Girl, as performed by Casey Killingsworth.
We at the Digital Shorts would like to apologize for this video. We pride ourselves on making quality work and recognize that this one's just not up to par. In our defense, we had a whole other video lined up with a famous musical act, but they bailed at the last minute. So we did what anyone would do in that situation. We got drunk. You know what, though? If you've been watching this, it actually might be pretty good. Nope, still terrible. But you know what's cool about working for SNL? The top brass here really get it. They don't care if you fail, as long as you gave it your best effort. They certainly wouldn't fire you for something that's not your fault, like if the stars of your video never showed up even though you had a verbal agreement, Gnarls Barkley. Once again, our deepest apologies. Please enjoy the rest of Daiquiri Girl.
And Daiquiri Girl was portrayed by Lindsay Shookus, who worked in the talent department under Marcy Klein, and who was the one who called Bill Hader and told him who got the show.
I thought she looked familiar, and I was curious if you had the story about how Gnarls Barkley actually did bail out of that week's Play and Digital short.
I think they covered pretty well on the Seth Meyers Lonely Island podcast, so if you haven't listened to that yet, listen to it. It's awesome.
I'll have to listen to that particular one because I haven't gotten around to it yet.
November 15th, 2008, Season 34, Episode 8, with host Paul Rudd and musicist Beyonce, which also had an appearance by Justin Timberlake. This time, it's taking place in a car, where they're going on a road trip. The song is Garden Party by Ricky Nelson and the Stone Canyon Band. Now, Ricky Nelson is not an artist. I know he exists, I just never really feel for his music, but he is the son of Ozzie and Harriet, who had a rather prominent comedy series in the 1950s. And so they start off the car trip with road beers, but the driver, he gets a wine cooler. And so we start with Jason's premonition, where it's sex in the back of a cab. And they kept it discreet. They made sure they're under a coat. But once they're done, they were in a traffic jam, and the traffic started picking up again.
The second we were finished, traffic opened up. So the guy got out, got back in the driver's seat, and drove me home.
And apparently, that was not the first time he did it that day. Nice twist there. Bill, and this is one where it's not about his dad, but more about the time he almost got engaged.
I remember my girl came in the room and she said, "I'm pregnant." And I was like, "Great."
But when she turned around, I took off out the back door and drove away. Didn't see her for 2 weeks. Then one day I decided I would do the right thing and proposed.
What made you change your mind?
Her mom got nominated Vice President of the United States.
This is, of course, referring to Bristol Palin, who is the daughter of Sarah Palin, who was the running mate of John McCain. She got pregnant before they got married, and they actually they did end up getting married, which they hope would help Sarah Palin's campaign, which it totally did not. He ends up dumping her once the election's over. And then Will Forte is taking a drug test, has to take a drug test. And he likes to do cocaine once in a while. And so he gets the idea to get his friends pee. And he had some they were concerned about, okay, how do you sneak it in? Well, no, he basically just kept his mouth shut because he didn't have it in a jar. He was holding it in his mouth whole day.
So it made it pretty hard to talk.
And then at the end, it turns out that he still failed the test because apparently his friend does coke too. And what I kind of find kind of charming in a weird kind of way, Paul Rudd, who this song is his ringtone. He asks if someone can help him find his phone. So, like you do, you ask your friend to dial your number, and he finds it because the phone is up his butt on vibrate.
Don't hang up.
Yep, exactly.
Went to voicemail. Oop,
yeah.
New message.
That was a nice little twist on that. And just a bit of interesting stuff with the... Jason is offering various things throughout the sketch, where first, of course, he brings out the road beers and the wine cooler, and then he offers everyone Big League Chew, which is, of course, bubble gum, and then last order offers people mushrooms. I'm going to guess they're probably the drug...
The magic kind.
The magic kind, rather than just the standard mushrooms. At the end, bit of a shocker. They need to figure out where they're going, so they said, okay, the map's in the glove box, and Jason pulls out a gun. Is it loaded? And the blood spatter effect that they have is just so brilliant. He starts waving the gun around, and they find out it's loaded when Bill gets shot in the head.
Possibly another Pulp Fiction reference.
Yeah. The timing of the blood spatter, and then Bill with his timing with his head back. It was a rather shocking ending, but it just was so well executed.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. And the song that ends is actually the theme to Chips. Chips was a show in the 70s, 80s that had featured Eric Estrada and his partner, who were California Highway Patrol. So they're basically motorcycle cops in California. You notice in the end that two of the letters are lowercase. And the reason for that is because the initials for the California Highway Patrol is CHP. In the title of the series, they put the I and the S in lowercase to signify that these are just inserted just so you get the sound of chips.
This is probably the sketch that I'm least familiar with musically. I mean, the only context I have for Rick Nelson when he hosted SNL in February of 1979 and did that Twilight Zone sketch, which I have even less context for, because it was him walking in on all the other dopey 50s sitcom families like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best, I Love Lucy and the Twilight Zone and Leave It to Beaver were the only shows there that I had any context for, given my age. And I've only seen two of them, so I didn't get all the beats that those shows were parody. I mean, I know Belushi played Danny Thomas, but people my age would really only know him as the guy who founded the St. Jude Hospital.
Yes.
And yeah, Chips is another thing I've seen more parodies of than the real show. I know they made a movie of it recently. Mad TV did Chips 2002 with Danny Masterson and Wilmer Valderrama and Mila Kunis, and boy, that sounds like it aged horribly now. And there was that one early Family Guy cutaway where, like, Eric Estrada was talking to some girls in a car. Hey, I might have to arrest you for being too beautiful, as a big tanker truck marked pure uncut cocaine and heroin drives by, and he's just completely oblivious to it. And hey, with the guys all being in the same car on a road trip, this marks the first of 4 big setting changes for these sketches.
Yeah.
This being the fall of 2008. A Sarah Palin joke, whether Tina's involved or not, is going to get a major applause break, as this one did.
Yeah.
Although, I think Bristol's boyfriend was Levi Johnston, I think Tripp was like their baby brother.
And you're right, Levi Johnson was her baby daddy.
What this makes me think of was around June 2009 when David Letterman told that joke about the Palins went to Shea Stadium to see the Yankees play, and then it took a wrong turn when Jeter knocked up the daughter, and Sarah Palin made a big stink about that because it was actually the younger, underage Palin daughter, whose name escapes me at the moment, who was at the
Willow.
game. It was Willow, not Bristol. And that was like a big controversy for Letterman in the summer of 2009. I mean, he apologized for the joke, but Sarah Palin just pounced on it, saying he needs to be canceled. There were protests that lasted for a day, and then people forgot about it until Letterman's big sex scandal a few months later, where he had to admit he was cheating on his wife with 2 of his staff members, and someone was trying to extort money out of him to keep quiet. I just read in that book, The War on Late Night. This was around the time Conan started his short run hosting The Tonight Show. And Jeff Zucker from NBC was like trying to berate Conan into inviting Sarah Palin on as a guest, but he didn't want to. Come on, it's a business. It's competition. You go after. You got to kill each other in the ratings. But Conan thought, Letterman's my idol, and that'd be the shittiest thing in the world to do to him. Just like both Jay and Dave realized the shittiest thing in the world to do to Conan would be to have Jay come on as Dave's guest the night Conan started his Tonight Show, so that didn't happen. And anyway, sorry for that tangent, but
all the books on the whole late night debacle I highly recommend. So just some other bits of the episode. This is where the affectionate family. I can't remember if this is the first one. I think it might be.
Yeah, this is the first one.
Bill just totally dominating that one. There's also featured Scared Straight.
Scared Straight I ran kind of hot and cold on, but the one at the 50th recently was amazing.
With Michael Longfellow. Now, around this time, being an election term, of course, with all the states, they have propositions that they want to. California, for the election, Proposition 8 had been approved, which was banning same-sex marriage in California. Now, this was later overturned by the Supreme Court, but there's 2 things in this episode that relate to that. Weekend Update, they have Bobby Moynihan as Snagglepuss, which is one of the impressions he did at his audition, talking about Proposition 8. And apparently he is married to the great Gazoo, as portrayed by Will Forte.
From the Flintstones, yes.
The other one is with Bill and
Paul Rudd, the host.
Where there are 2 guys who work in a parking lot. What they do, or what if we got gay married, and it's a nice Jersey Bill moment. Justin Timberlake had a cameo, as this was the Single Lady sketch, which was partially written by Bobby Moynihan, and Beyonce was reluctant, but Justin Timberlake went to bat for the sketch for him. So because of Justin, he got this sketch on the air, and it's a classic.
Yeah, and this might have been the second best song memories behind the first one for me. And while I was watching this one, I couldn't help but be reminded of the strong reaction that this episode got when it originally aired, because I remember watching this in real time, because most people would remember this episode for the Beyonce, Timberlake, Single Ladies thing. Outside of that, a lot of people said this episode reminded them of a season 20 episode. That whole season was, people remember it for featuring gratuitous amounts of sketches focused on, blood, gore, vomit, and cheap gay jokes. So when people saw things like the Vogel checks and the Prop 8 stuff, which, could be described as political social commentary that they had to do that week. And when people saw those, the infamous digital short, Everyone's a Critic, and this song Memories, I guess they reminded of stuff like Rookie Cop and America's Funniest Hate Videos and things like that. People are like, what is this episode going for? Because I remember this airing like back to back with Everyone's a Critic, and then that was followed by a live sketch that just featured Rudd and Wig singing a very folksy country song, very slow, mellow. It involved them singing out an entire tracking number to a package. Keen or someone interrupt them. Is this song going anywhere? It's like, what, this episode's swinging for the fences in too many different directions.
Oh, one other small note with this one is, of course, after the Single Ladies sketch, Beyonce did perform the song Single Ladies, and the backup dancer on the right is Heather Morris, who, if you have watched Glee, you would know her from there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. Yeah, Heather Morris was actually hired on Glee as a dancer.
Moving on to the next song, Memories, also from season 34, February 7th, 2009 episode with host Bradley Cooper, musical guest TV on the radio, and the one song is To Be With You by Mr. Big. And that reminds me of those like CD compilation commercials for like ones like 80s love ballads, but there was like they'd play them on cable, and there was one for like metal ballads because even bad boys have a soft side, and this was one of them.
Back in the 70s and 80s, K-Tel was a big thing.
This one starts out, all the guys are wearing black suits, and it looks like they're just drinking scotch at a bar, and they're talking about their buddy Jonathan, like, man, his life's over. We lost another one. First, we get Jason's story, which his girlfriend caught him jerking off to internet porn. She was like, what are you doing? And they got kicked out of a Starbucks. That was it. And Bill goes back to talking about his dad, who just told him that his kid sister that he grew up with was adopted, and he waited 25 years to tell him so they wouldn't treat her weird growing up. And his reaction, he was thrilled because now they can finally stop sneaking around and get married. Which, okay, that's decent. Doesn't quite go the way you think it would. There's Will's story. Remember that time he put his penis in that jacuzzi jet in that Holiday Inn in Bristol, Tennessee, and the fire department had to pry him out that special tool that messed up his pipes down there for good? He was thinking about trying that exact same thing again. And then Bradley Cooper's story, sadly might be the highlight of this, about how rough online dating is because, there were no apps. Smartphones really hadn't caught on, but everyone exaggerates. Went to a hotel for a hookup and unexpectedly met this 50-year-old black guy who was really pissed. And he said to him, "You're a liar. You're not a bodybuilder." And Bradley Cooper says, "I'm a liar. You're not a 12-year-old boy." There's a twist ending. Guys are like, hey, to good times and good music, and to our friend Jonathan. They pull out to reveal these guys are actually placing their drinks on top of a weirdly small and rectangular shaped coffin. So they set them down, and then the bagpipes start to play. So it's obvious at this point Jonathan's life is literally over because they're at his funeral and they're his pallbearers. So they pick him up and they're like, man, Jonathan's heavy. Whoops. So he's too heavy for them to carry. So they lean over like they tripped and he's going to fall.
They didn't actually trip because you may notice that there's 4 sets of handles. So the first and third handles, so it was a balance issue actually, because if they wanted to balance it properly, they would have had the 2 guys at the end. So because they had the balance wrong, that's how it tipped over the coffin.
This one just didn't do much for me. I got some slight cough and flops vibes, somewhere young Tim Robinson stirs. I kind of like that they were at a funeral because it reminded me of the one Brasky sketches, the funeral is another setting change, but I don't think they pulled off the reveal that well, because I feel like the entire time you could kind of sense that they were in a funeral standing over a coffin. This may actually be the weakest one for me at this point, because the writing gave it a gassed out feeling, but the guys' performances helped save this.
Oh, especially at the end where they're really getting into the song at the end. They're like this totally headbang into the thing.
They're jumping up and down to help this, and Sudeikis was trying to desperately make his work, and so was Cooper. But other than that, you could kind of tell that this was coming from a time period in SNL's history where there were two different periods where they did 4 shows in a row. Once in March of 2008 to make up for lost time from the writer's strike, and one at the beginning of 34 in September, October of 2008 to also get in as much election material as they could, and doing Weekend Update Thursdays. And I feel like this is another time they did 4 or 5 in a row, because didn't Steve Martin host on January 31st? And I also, Rosario Dawson and Neil Patrick Harris. It was 2009 was a pretty heavily front-loaded time for SNL, but they didn't quite have the juice to pull it off in the way that you hoped they would.
I did like the turnaround at the end with that being a funeral. The one thing I forgot to mention from the beginning of this is in all of these song ones, Jason is always doing the little extra singing bits.
Man wants to show off his pipes, but go ahead.
Some nice highlights in this episode which was the talk show Bad Guys, Good Conversation, where Bradley Cooper was the guy from The Karate Kid. Bill does his James Gumb impression. One thing I really wish we'd have on Second Chance Theater, the Jamie Gumb talk show, his co-host is the girl in the well from Silence of the Lambs. And so when they cut to her, it's basically a well.
I remember Bill talking about this on Bill Simmons' podcast around like September of 2009, mentioning that, you know, him and Mulaney were trying to get his James Gumb impression on, and they wrote the James Gumb talk show, but the results were much too dark to ever air on television, so I don't think that's ever going to see the light of day unless there's like a live script reading at like the Largo in LA or something.
Yeah, it would have been nice, but you get what you can. Going into April 17th, 2010, Season 35, Episode 19. Our host is Ryan Felipe. Can't remember what he was doing at the time.
He was in MacGruber the movie.
Ah, right. They're in a backyard. The song is Breakfast at Tiffany's from Deep Blue Something, which is a song I love. Jason, of course, as always, goes first. It's a very similar story that was done with Will Forte in the...
It was Sudeikis, and it was in the Ashton Kutcher one just a couple of seasons before this.
Bill, not referencing his dad when he first met Jennifer.
Business trip and came home a day early, and I found her in bed with another dude.
No.
Really? Yeah. It was terrible. The guy was such a dirty skis. Yeah. He was yelling all these smutty things at her. It was rough. I think he even gave her a venereal disease.
Oh, yeah. What did you do?
Oh, when I found him, I just snapped. I mean, I beat the living crap out of the guy.
Oh, was he okay? Or?
Not at the time. He seems fine now. You know, guess he's a little bummed he didn't win the Masters, but, you know.
This being early 2010, a Tiger Woods sex scandal joke gets a huge applause break. Even as highlighted by how subtly Bill delivers this. You know, really piled on how much people had it out for Tiger Woods at this time.
And then on to Will Forte, where he went on a trip to Asia. While they're in China, he saw a panda bear that was very, very cute, very sweet. It was a hard thing to describe because it was just so delicious. A lot of flavors going on there. And then we have Ryan Felipe, who masturbates at work doing chat roulette, caught by his boss. He was afraid that he could be transferred to another parish.
At least he wouldn't get fired.
Well, for all we know, he may not be Catholic. I don't know if it's something else. A parish refers to locations of Catholic cathedrals and things like that. And they end this one with, since they're in D.C., that they're there protesting Obama.
They all put on these tri-corner hats and pickets on. I like Bill's intense commitment to just screaming socialism as he walks out. They pull off the hat trick of very 2010 jokes here. because the joke is that they were at a Tea Party rally. And in case you don't know or have blocked this out of your memory, per Wikipedia, the Tea Party movement was an American fiscally conservative political movement within the Republican Party that began in 2007, catapulted into the mainstream by Congressman Ron Paul's presidential campaign. The movement expanded in response to the policies of Democratic President Barack Obama and was a major factor in the 2010 wave elections, in which Republicans gained 63 House seats and took control of the U.S. House of Representatives. So I think this would be something that Sarah Palin and John Boehner championed around this time. It's nice to have that quaint reminder of when conservative politics were, actually patriotic in a sane, reasonable way, where people actually did care about taxes. And it's nice to hear people talk about taxes and not tariffs. This one was about as equally as bad as a Bradley Cooper funeral. Jason, they just repeated the exact same joke with maybe minus one beat, which was emblematic of just how burnout season 35 was. It's like the show had some kind of retroactive amnesia where they do things the same way regardless of whether they worked or not. At least Bill got one of the bigger audience reactions, but it must help that Tiger Woods sex scandal jokes didn't feel as hacky or overdone as chat roulette and pre-sex abuse jokes did by this point. And Ryan Philippe felt a little bit too stiff for this episode. And, here's my tidbit. So around this time, it was my freshman year of college at CU Boulder. There was going to be a live Q&A screening of MacGruber, the movie. In attendance were going to be Will Forte, Yorma Taccone, John Solomon, Brian Tucker, and Ryan Philippe, who incidentally I'd just seen in the movie Crash in a film studies class at the time, and some guys in my dorm said you should have asked him about that. Why'd you shoot Ludacris in that movie? I remember Will Forte answering that Forte talked about the Benjamin Franklin sketch. He played a girl who looked like Benjamin Franklin, which he would do about 4 years later on the first Second Chance Theater.
This episode introduces the world to the game show host, Vince Blake. There's been an argument whether it's Vince Blake or is it Vince Blight, but I looked at all the sketches on Peacock with the subtitles, and they all said Blake. This game show was, I got this. 3 men fighting over who gets to pay the check. Whoever ends up paying the check wins the round. There's also the Shake Weight commercial, not for the actual Shake Weight itself, but for a DVD of the commercial, because you never know when that commercial is going to be on, and you want to make sure to see Pink T-shirt girl. Andy Samberg as Mort Feingold, accountant for the stars.
I think this might have been another divisive episode too. I think Stooge hated it until the Shake Weight commercial, but it wasn't that. I think the thing people may remember or cite the most about this episode would be Kesha's performance, where she sang TikTok and suddenly started playing like a laser light show air harp and just said, do you ever think that we might be the aliens or whatever? It was, yeah, you can see why they never had her on again.
Oh, this actually got referenced on an episode of Late Night with Seth Meyers. There's this running bit they have on there called Clearing the Air.
I'm sorry that I forgot to return your call last week. Both of my kids had colds, so things were crazy around the house.
It was a really important call. I really needed you, man. I was freaking out, and I needed a friend, and you're nowhere to be found.
Oh, my God, what happened?
I couldn't remember the name of that Kesha song. The one she did on SNL in 2010.
TikTok?
TikTok. Right.
Bill, do you forgive me?
Seth, you are forgiven.
I think we've said all we need to say about this episode, so...
I'm going to do the next one because we're going to be saving... Casey was the one who put this episode edition, so I felt that we should honor that and give him the last sketch. May 14th, 2011. The host is Ed Helms. The song was Cat Stevens' Wild World. It takes place, again, back in a bar. So Jason's he first learned the song on guitar. His father was a big influence on teaching him music, teaching him guitar. And so his father's always with him because he keeps his ashes in a Jamba Juice cup. And that's why there's a straw in there as well, so he can breathe. Back to my dad. He was estranged from his father.
Aren't you guys estranged?
Yeah, we haven't seen each other in years. I feel terrible about it. It's only recently I found out where he was living.
Why did you call him?
I tried, but by the time I found his number, several Navy SEALs had killed him and thrown his body in the ocean.
This is the year that
Osama bin Laden was assassinated.
But he did inherit a sweet porn collection, so yeah, it was Operation Neptune Spear. The last one for Ed Helms. He comes off that he could be a Saturday Night Live cast member, but I know he's mainly known for The Office.
And The Daily Show, and not just... He could be an SNL cast member, not just because people confuse him for Jason Sudeikis all the time, but I do believe Andy Samberg's in this because Will Forte has left the show by this point, and I believe Andy has a story.
He is talking about giving patients prostate exams and how important they are.
And he's also a dentist.
Yes, you think would go back to being a doctor, but was a nice surprise. Finally, we got Ed Helms has a habit of putting on a scuba suit, going in underneath porta potties and taking photos, which kind of reminds me of the South Park episode of Crazy Kenny. He was being dared to do all this stuff and took all these pictures, made it into a book, upshots of mostly women using the porta potty, and he made a book. The only book copy he gave it to his mom. Best Mother's Day present ever. Jamba Juice cup with the ashes does come into play because he absentmindedly picks up the Jamba Juice cup and then he ends up blowing out the ashes. The very end of it is where we have Paul Britton, who definitely got a raw deal that year, was very underrated, and was let go before the end of the season, and that's when they brought in Kate McKinnon. He is the doctor from the Human Centipede. And so they're all getting in line to become a human centipede. With the song Chapped into Neil's Love Can Keep Us Together. I've never watched the Human Centipede. I've read about it, and I'm pretty much sure I'm never going to see this film because I just don't want to think about it. One thing that does nag me, because there's a big reason why I call the production company Wacky Notion Productions. Because my wacky notion I keep thinking of is they're all formed out in a line, is why does Bill Hader have his mouth open? Because he doesn't have to be attached. If he's going to be at the front of the centipede, he's not going to be attached to anyone's butt.
Well, he just has a very expressive face, and he knows it, and he knows that facial expression. Everyone else making it, he can get the biggest laugh out of it.
Yeah, I know, but my logical ADHD brain comes into play with that. The ashes. It was a really good one. And what are your views on this?
It was mildly better than the previous two, just because Andy and Ed's stories both got me. He just hopes that no one tells his female patients, or they don't find out that they don't have prostates, and he's a dentist. And I did like Ed Helms mentioning that the title of his book was Porta Potty Hotties, A View from Below.
Yeah.
And, it actually reminded me of a different South Park episode with a similar gag where in season 2, they're trying to get Robert Redford and the Sundance people out of South Park.
Mr. Hanky.
So they go to the sewer to find Mr. Hanky, but they find Mr. Garrison in a scuba suit holding Mr. Twig. What are you doing? Are you just hanging out in a sewer? Children, do you know how to file a police report? No? Okay, good. See you at school. I have kind of seen Human Centipede. I was trying to get I was in college trying to get some homework done in a dorm, and a roommate put it on, so I watched it with divided attention. And I have seen the Human Centipede South Park episode,
yes,
which I believe that episode is the main focus of the South Park 6 Days to Air documentary.
Yes, I love that.
That Bill was in, which we may have to cover.
Oh, definitely yes. Because he did write for South Park off and on for a few years. And he actually won an Emmy for working on a season of South Park.
I didn't know that, but that's good for him. Another career accolade.
One of the big sketches of this, and which is definitely of the show, the What Up With That features the actual Lindsey Buckingham. So where we find out there are two Lindsey Buckinghams. Lindsey Buckingham, fabulous musician, member of Fleetwood Mac. I loved his first solo album. It's definitely one of my favorite albums of all time. He does get a kick out of Bill Hader's impression, which is mostly visual, because he never speaks a word. If you let him speak, you would have found out why there's two of us.
And also I think this episode is best remembered for maybe One Take Tony with Sandberg and Keenan, and it was a little disappointing for Ed Helms as a host. And I say that because the big centerpiece of this episode would be the live action TV Funhouse with the live action versions of the ambiguously gay duo with John Hamm and Jimmy Fallon as Ace and Gary. Steve Carell was Big Head. Colbert was Brainio in one of his two rare cameos on SNL. Ed Helms was a villain. I think Fred Armisen was Lizardo. I think Ed Helms is like the cheap Two-Face ripoff. That was a lot of fun. Okay, and I'll add one more note on the Ed Helms one. Bill made his work. Bill's, there's kind of a thing of a recurring theme, especially the last few, is just there's forced topicality. Talks about Bin Laden the week after he was shot, and he talks about, before that he talked about Tiger Woods at the height of his sex scandal, and even before that he talked about Sarah Palin after she just lost her election. The forced topicality doesn't always work, and we'll get another one in the next one that's kind of but it just kind of goes to prove what people say when they say that SNL might not have taken away the right lessons from season 34, and they may have never escaped 2008. So the last Song Memories does go out with a bit of a bang. The song is Beatles' You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, and Andy Samberg's left the group, so now Kenan Thompson is joined, and this is from the September 22nd, 2012 episode with host Joseph Gordon-Levitt, musical guest Mumford & Sons. He's starting a season in mid-September during election year. They really were trying to recreate 2008 there. This time, the guys were at an old English pub in London. Joseph's character invited them because he's marrying an English girl. And playing in the pub is a Beatles cover band calling themselves Hey Dude. And the band Hey Dude is played by members of Mumford & Sons. So the one time a musical guest would be in this. The last season for Bill and Jason as cast members. Jason's story involves, they had a hard time getting past customs. Him and his girlfriend got thoroughly searched, and they got a little freaked out when they found her vibrator and they thought a bomb got off, so they took him to a private room to pull it out at Jason's ass, and the batteries are still up there. Keenan's story is he's been getting a lot of foreign ladies, better luck here than at home, and he does have to lie a bit, you know how guys are. He's been seeing this Croatian girl who he, for some reason, had to tell her that he was an Olympic athlete who came to London for that year's Olympics, just never left. Bill says she's going to be really disappointed when she finds out the truth that you're not an Olympic athlete. And Keenan says she'll be more disappointed to learn that Michael Phelps is white and that this blank CDR I glued to a red, white, and blue lanyard is not a gold medal. Bill's story, bringing it full circle, is about his dad, who's a huge Beatles fan, who said he would take him to London and walk down Abbey Road someday, but never had time for him because he was always too busy with work or charity. Now the tables have turned. It's like a cat's in the cradle situation, as Jason says. Now the son's busy and the father has all the time in the world.
Well, you should have brought him on this trip.
Oh, I can't do that. He's in jail. Yeah, just another day in the life of Larry Sandusky.
Yeah.
In case you don't get it, or in case you've understandably blocked this from your memory, Bill's character is supposed to be the son of Jerry Sandusky. For years was the assistant coach to Joe Paterno at Penn State, and who founded the Second Mile organization, a nonprofit at-risk youth charity for children. Yeah, he's currently serving 30 to 60 years in prison for child molestation. This led to Paterno's firing from Penn State, which students protested. I don't think they knew they were protesting because, well, Joe Paterno, they all hesitated to report this to police. They may have tried to cover it up to protect Penn State's reputation. I don't think this got quite the reaction they were hoping for, but I think Bill managed to make it work and sell it just as well as the other guys did. This is like a year old, and Penn State, Paterno, Sandusky, these were like go-to names for cheap shock laughs at SNL around this time. Seth treated him like Norm treated Michael Jackson and OJ. Sudeikis may have played him once in the Gillette razor commercial from later this season, which didn't make a ton of sense because he was paired with the one good thing that came out of SNL satirizing this was one of Sudeikis' commentaries as the devil, saying that this is too evil even for him, so he's going to give up being the devil and go back to doing customer service for Time Warner Cable. And then Joseph Gordon-Levitt's story, he's been trying to get his 11-year-old nephew into the Beatles. His parents aren't around, he's staying with them. At first, he didn't like having an 11-year-old nephew around, kind of cramped his style. It's kind of a burden, but he's learned to bond with him. They go to ballparks and museum together, and he has a real adventurous spirit. He's a real explorer. His nephew told him if he could go anywhere in the world, where would it be? It would be Mexico. So he sent his nephew on a one-way bus trip to Mexico, never looked back, and he sent him a letter that he didn't even open, let alone read. The twist ending here is they all go out into the audience singing, "Hey, you got to hide your love away," like it's the Lion King on Broadway. It's like a weirdly anachronistic, crowd-pleasing ending to such a non-crowd-pleasing sketch. And this is just slightly better than the last two, just based on the performances and energy, just barely putting it over. I felt some of the writing was a bit flat, but these went out on a positive note.
Yeah, just as a little note, I have actually seen Mumford & Sons live, but not as a concert goer. I was doing a lot of gig work at the time. I would get regular gigs to work concession at BC Place, which is a big stadium. I got to see a few concerts. I was on staff for serving the beer there because I had my I was certified to be able to serve alcohol. So I got to enjoy Mumford & Sons while serving people beer.
That's a nice story.
I do love the ending for this. Now, a lot of people would think that they did this big of an ending because of Bill Hader leaving at the end of the year, but he didn't actually completely decide to leave until after Christmas, because that's when they went on Christmas break. He had a discussion with his wife at the time, Maggie Carey, because they have the 2 kids, and they didn't have a yard, although as when Michael's pointed out, no, they have yards in Westchester as well. He did an extra year just because he wanted to earn money for his second child, Harper Hader, who is actually one of his daughters who does not have a middle name. Not unusual because I don't have a middle name. Deej is actually DJ, which stands for the first 2 letters of a hyphenated name, and that's about as far as we're going to go with that. It was just a happy coincidence that they did a big ending, the musical guest being an actual live band. In the background, Keita was an interesting addition. The only consistents were Jason and Bill. It was an interesting use of the musical guest is what I would say for that one.
I didn't know Bill decided to leave after the Martin Short Paul McCartney episode. I'd always heard that he was kind of on the fence until the week of the Justin Bieber episode, his least favorite host, and he decided, yeah, I'm going to leave. This will be my last season.
No, he told one that he was going to be leaving at the end of the season in February. And he said, well, let's just sit on it for a while. He understands when people did leave, but would like them to stay, because as he did say, to help calm him down, you can work here for as long as you want. They did announce it until the week of his last week, because that's when they had an article in the New York Times come out about it. So like I said, he just had a second child and was getting a lot of, they're always going back and forth between New York and LA. She was getting a lot more directing work out there, so he decided, okay, this is a good time to leave. I can concentrate stuff in California, and my wife can good work. She actually directed a few episodes of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. You just know when it's time to leave, and this was Bill's time. And actually, throughout the season, towards in November, was when he was filming Skeleton Twins with Christian.
But I think that's the episode.
So, next episode, we're going to try something a little different as well. For mentioned here, I'm a big sucker for voices on various other podcasts I've been on. I'm also a big list fan, and I'm a very big fan of Watch Mojo, which is a Canadian company that does various top 10, top 20 different retrospective lists. So I watch Mojo stuff all the time. So we're going to do a commentary type reaction to one of their Bill Hader top 10 lists. So the one we're going to start with is 10 times Bill Hader was awesome. That's one where I would really want some great user feedback from, just to see if this kind of thing worked for you. This is an experiment I figured we'd give a try.
This will be a fun one to dive into. This will be another breeze, and I'm a big fan of online lists too, but more like early Cracked than Watch Mojo. And that reminds me, I was going to say that a Cracked list was my first exposure to the song Breakfast at Tiffany's, because it was one of their list songs that were creepy or had an unreliable narrator, but their whole take on it was, dude, this girl is telling you she doesn't like what you like and has nothing in common with you, so maybe stop digging and try to, leave her alone because she's dropping obvious hits that she doesn't want to go out on a date with you. But and that was my first exposure to that song. So that's the episode.
So I am Deej Barons, and will continue to be.
And I will still be Casey Killingsworth until I am informed otherwise. And Deej, what is it that we do?
If I'm not mistaken, that we are the people who heart Hader. And hopefully you are too.
Yeah, you're definitely not mistaken. If you're listening to this, you're in the right place.
You betcha. Thank you for listening to We Heart Hader. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. We Heart Hader is a presentation of Wacky Notion Productions. Created by Deej Barons. Hosted by Deej Barons and Casey Killingsworth. Recording and editing by Deej Barons. Intro and outro music by Music Unlimited, used under Creative Commons license, courtesy of Pixabay.com.